And hopefully that you'll be able to see it. Whoops. It's going backwards. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop sharing, fix this, and start again. Okay. You can see this, Joy?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Gary Deziel. I work for the University of Vermont Extension, and I'm a community development specialist. But I have a background is as associate dean of UVM Extension, and I was the financial manager. I was responsible for HR and a number of other things. So the last few years, I've been focusing a lot on HR as well as budget items and working with the wonderful people of the Vermont Department of Libraries, and just really enjoy working with libraries. I was a trustee also for a total of about 7 years. I ended last year, and I was the treasurer of the Georgia Public Library for 7 years. So here's the agenda. It's a pretty simple agenda. We're going to be talking about the search and the hire, and then the first steps of the journey. Now, this is it. As I've worked on these slides, it's a huge topic. So I know that you all have a lot of varied experience in this and a lot of wisdom in hiring, managing employees, onboarding employees, or, bringing them on as new employees. And also I very know very fully aware of your research skills, and a lot of this stuff you can find. There's so much stuff on hiring and onboarding on the internet. So I'm going to follow up with a kind of a folio that I'm going to be sending Joy, which will have a number of PDF articles as well as all the links that are in this presentation and some other extras that I won't even be talking about, like hiring bias and that sort of thing. So we'll get to it. I think I have about 15 slides, and what's most important is to hear your questions and comments. And this will be very, very kind of like, 30,000 foot kind of thing. Won't get into the weeds too much, but hopefully with the slide deck in your hands and some of the other documents, it'll help guide you on your next hire, on your next onboarding, or give you some ideas on how to manage the process. So hiring, it starts with the job description. That's, you'll always hear me talking about job description. That's like the basis of the job and the hire, and it supports everything that we do in the hiring process. The job description we'll go over in a little bit more detail, but the key parts of a job description are the essential functions, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required, and then often credentials or experience required or preferred. The ad is built off the job description, and then the interview is built off the ad and the job description. So how are people responding to your inquiry, to your request for job applications, is based on the ad and what they may know about your library, what research they do about your library. So the interview is usually there's a lot of different techniques. It's usually maybe an hour interview, or there could be a first interview, a second interview. But what I always recommend, and what I do, I just finished hiring somebody for Lake Champlain Sea Grant who started at the end of January. It was a long process, but all the questions were behavior-based interview questions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides from now. And then you need methods to measure the candidate. So you need a matrix of first to screen the applicants, and then another matrix of how to, when you're doing the interview, how do these candidates rank in regard to the essential functions, required skills, knowledge and ability, and the credentials. What I mean by a matrix is just a series of questions. Do they have, if you have certain essential functions, do they have experience? How do they rate? 1 through 2 or something like that. The higher letter of offer is really important. And in the folio, in the folder that I'll send you, are some examples of a letter of offer from the Society for HR Management. And then the employee accepts it. Now, throughout this, also remember that if you are a municipal library, that you have a HR policy, which may guide some of this, or the larger town policy on how they may do things, and you want to be consistent with the town if appropriate. I know that libraries vary across the spectrum on how lockstep they are with the municipality. And then we'll talk about the second half of the program here today. We'll be talking about onboarding, things to do before they start, things to do that first day in the first week, and then the first month, and then a little bit longer term. And again, thank you for attending. This is just a broad overview, but I am always available, or you can, email me or call me for further follow-up on anything that you might have questions about. Job description, there's there's a link here, how to develop a job description. You can find examples of job descriptions, and I've included in what I'm going to send you an example from the Society of Human Resource Management for a library director and an assistant library director. Of course, you can reach out, and which you do. You can reach out to other libraries of similar size or similar demographics to your town, and find job descriptions that are appropriate to you. But this slide, I'm sorry about how small the writing is, but it includes all the things that you would think of including in a job description, and some things that aren't appropriate. Classification is important. Are they exempt or non-exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act? Exempt means you're not eligible for overtime. Non-exempt means you're paid basically by the hour. And if you work more than X number of hours, 40 hours, for instance, you get time and a half, either in overtime pay or compensatory time. Reports to, who does the position report to? What's the summary of the job? What are the essential functions? What kind of competency is required? Do they supervise others? Don't they supervise others? What's the work environment? Are there any really kind of, different physical demands? Because there are in the library, moving around a lot of books. The type of work, full-time, part-time, how many hours, what's the shifts, that sort of thing. And then credentialing, what's required, what's preferred, and other duties. We always include other duties as assigned. So in our job descriptions at the University of Vermont, and we also do it by percentage too. Like this essential function is like 50% of your job. This essential function is 25% of your job, and then maybe 10%, 5% other duties as assigned. Advertising would be the next step after you have the job description in place. You're sure about what you want to hire, what the needs are, and it's driven by the strategic plan, about your mission, about the vision you have for the library. Maybe you're changing something, more focusing on something. So job descriptions change, but once you have the job description, then ads are, based on that job description. Now, the investment you make in advertising, of course, depends on the position. There are a lot of part-time, low hours per week jobs in Vermont public libraries. And we'll talk about, do you really have to do any interviews? Do you really have to advertise for some jobs? We'll talk about that soon. But promoting it locally is probably what you find most often. If you're hiring for a library director, it may be quite different about what the extent of that message of that ad you want out there. But you know all these venues, posting in local businesses, word of mouth, social media. I do know that is quite costly to post an ad in some of the statewide or local newspapers nowadays. So it does cost money to promote the position. So the trustees yourself have to think carefully about what's the investment and what's the position that you're hiring for. Inclusion and diversity is really important as you reach out to audiences that may be underserved in your community or who aren't usually represented, and then making it compelling. I think that libraries have it really easy in making the job compelling. It's not a Maple Fields or a Cumberland Farms working the cash register. This is you're really helping. And not that that's not an important job. It is, but I think there's a little more intrinsic um, uh, joy in working in the library. So you have, I think, an easy way to um, sell the library. So here's my slide about hiring without a full blown process. If just first, it's not illegal to hire without advertising, without an interview. You can do that. And however, make sure you're not violating any anti-discrimination laws, like we're only going to consider this gender or we're only going to consider this age group. And you're not violating internal hiring policies. If you're in a union shop, for instance, that union collective bargaining agreement is the what you have to follow. Or if you have a, which I hope you do have, an HR policy, it may say what steps you need to take. But there are often jobs that are 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week or 12 hours a week. And you may have a great candidate who is working with you right now. They're right in step with the mission and values. They're wonderful with patrons, that sort of thing. And you have maybe a part-time permanent job. There's nothing illegal or wrong about hiring that person into the job. Um, However, overall, the interview process allows the employer, that's you, as well as the employee, to really think more about what the opportunity is. And it's also an opportunity for you to find the right person. You might find somebody out by advertising. Say you have a good candidate, but by advertising, you might have a handful of good candidates, and that may surprise you, and you might find something that you wouldn't otherwise find in a person. At the University of Vermont, we call this opportunity hiring, and we've stopped that for permanent part-time and permanent full-time positions because of equity issues and because we want everybody to have an opportunity. And even if we had the perfect candidate that we knew about that actually worked for us maybe on an hourly basis and we want to hire them, we still did a formal interview process, job search and interview process, just because we wanted to make sure that we weren't missing opportunities. And also you could give the wrong impression. There's we live in small communities. There's favoritism. There's You have to watch out, of course, hiring your second cousin or something like that, and nepotism issues. But it's fine to do this. I think there's a question, Joy.
There is, it's from me, and I have a question about this hiring, internally. So in my previous career as a musician, there was, union orchestras, but there was a way that people could be bumped into the finals. Like, so there were multiple rounds of auditions. And so internal people, and sometimes even like a local person who subbed a lot, would be bumped. Like, they wouldn't have to start at the very beginning of the process. Is there any way, like, how does that, is there a way that that might apply in like a library setting?
Um, yeah, it could be. It all depends on what your process is. My most recent job interview, we did two interviews. We did a second interview, but a lot of job interview or search process just have one interview. So, but I guess you'd have to look at what if there's any existing policy and procedure. If there's a union contract, see what that says. Um, but I would start from the beginning because there's a different set of questions too for round one and round two. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Joy?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think that the reason that that happened was because there was an assumption that like we already knew that like the person could answer what it was equivalent of maybe the first round questions. So it was a professional courtesy for one thing, but also it was more efficient.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Now like in this context, maybe it's like not legit either.
I mean, it could be. It all depends on what you know your comfort level at that. And again, if you do actually have two round of interviews, then it might be appropriate that like this person is going to get through that first round. We know that. Let's winnow it down to two or three other people or one other person, and then have invite this candidate in for the final round. So I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And now Margaret has a question or comment as well.
I migrate.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I am wondering, I guess, and maybe I'm going to answer my own question right here, but say you have someone in your library staff world who might be interested in the position and you're not sure they're the right person for the position. It's okay to say we are going to just do the full interview process for everybody for the purposes of equity, just and not you're not lying, but that is an okay way to go, sort of the flip side of what Joy was talking about.
Yes, yes, and that's a really good example, Margaret. I've been in situations where we knew that internally one or two people may be applying for the job, but we were unsure whether we, yeah, okay, to be blunt, I guess we felt that they weren't quite appropriate for the position. So that was another reason to run a formal job search, is because it protected you from the perception of like not of being partial. So this it's very appropriate to do. It's and the formal job search really helps guide you to the right candidate, the candidate you want. And yeah, you might know that this other candidate, that maybe they have the skill set, but maybe they don't have quite the the personalities that is needed for the position or something like that. So a formal job search will um, help you through that. Thanks, Margaret. So moving to the job interview, I always talk about behavior-based interviewing, and there are questions that that focus on the candidate's past experience, what's happened to them, how they dealt with it, what they learned from it, and it's meant to try to judge what their future behavior might be and their future success or non-success in the future. And there are people that interview really well and have an edge over some other people who may not interview as well, for various reasons. And if you do not ask behavior-based questions, if you ask like, how do you feel? Are you good at Microsoft Word? Questions like that. It's like playing t-ball. It's just like, yes, I can answer that question, but or if you're good with customers, because in the black box here, it's just here's an example of behavior-based interview question. Tell me about a time you made a mistake that affected a customer. How did you resolve the problem? What did you learn? Those kinds of questions are really good. Saying like the interviewee has to think about a situation, and that really you can see like, oh, that was a really mature response. That was very good. That's exactly what we want. Or, well, that was a little off base. And I have some links here on examples of behavior-based interview questions. And if you Google this, or Bing it, or whatever you do for a search engine, you'll find a lot of examples of this. So an important part of the search, I mean, once you have the applications, is to be able to review them in like manner, apples to apples. And that's why we use a matrix on, there's a set of conditions or questions on the left side, and every applicant is rated, plus, minus, or 1 through 5, or something like that, or a check mark. If it requires a master's degree in library science, then if they don't have it, it's not checked. So that's an easy one, right? Credentials. Or experience, is this the job description? The job ad said 2 years of experience. It is in the resume and in the cover letter. Do we see that? So that's what the matrix would be. It looked essential functions, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and credentials. And then you choose the top candidates, you invite them in, do the questions, and hopefully you are working with the HR committee, a small group of people, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 people interviewing the person. Be very consistent in who asks the questions, and be consistent in everybody write down their observations and ranking. Reference checks are really important. It's always good too to have an actual, I call it a real reference check. You don't want to hear from somebody's friend or somebody's peer as much as you want to hear from their former supervisor or somebody who had authority and responsibility over them in the previous job, or volunteer work, or whatever it might be. Letter of offer here is highlighted. That's where you and I'm going to send you an example of a letter of offer. You have, like what times they work, when they start, what they're paid, all the details about benefits, whatever is in the offer letter, and they sign it, and off you go. So we're going to switch to onboarding now, and this is a slide I took from a webinar that I attended last October, and it was on onboarding, excuse me, by Civility Partners, and it was very good. This makes sense, because if you invest in people, if you show that you care about people and value them, they are going to be more committed to the library. They're going to be happier employees. And that first introduction to your library is really, really important. In fact, in the red writing up here, I'm going to read it. Our first impressions are generated by our experiences in our environment, which means that we can change our first impressions by changing the experiences that comprise those impressions. I remember when I started my job for UVM in 2001, that I was struck by how poor I shouldn't say this, but how poor the onboarding was. I walked into my office, there was really no one to greet me, and like I'd say, "Oh, there's your office over there," and it's just like, "Oh, well, you remember things like that," and so it's really important to make that good first impression, to make that new person feel comfortable and supported. So orientation versus onboarding, we'll talk about before they begin the first week, and then longer term. But orientation and onboarding. Orientation is really about things, and I'll get onto that. If onboarding represents an entire pie, orientation is but one slice of that pie. In this case, I think it's a tort, but I should have got a picture of a blueberry pie or something. So before the first day, you can't ask very much of people the first day, because there are labor laws that you don't want to violate. You don't want them to do any work, but they may feel more comfort if they know what, like, is it business informal? What is there something, that I need to bring with me? Yeah, you should bring lunch, we make them feel comfortable about what they're walking into. And the documents that I'll send you, sometimes deal with larger companies, and I know that we are smaller units, smaller organizations and nonprofit companies. But sharing with them the vision, mission, and value statement, before they get there, just so that they know when to show up, anything that might make them uncomfortable if they didn't know. And it sounds fairly odd to tell them like what to wear, but in the employee that I just hired, it's helpful. You just was business informal, and like people around the lab and around your office is jeans, things like that. So just so they feel a little bit more comfortable. Clear your calendar and be prepared. That's always sometimes a challenge. I know that you've got patrons coming in and out, but to make time for that new employee is very important. First week, I'm sorry, this writing is a little bit too small, but I wanted to fit it all on the slide. Orientation. So your orientation is about policy, of procedure, paperwork. It's about safety. It's about going over the position description and what they're expected to do. General training on like equipment, like here's how the photocopier works. Here's the software. Of course, you don't learn that all in one day. It's going to take you probably more than a week. But orientation is the kind of like the technical, the administrative stuff. Onboarding is about culture of your library. It's about values. So here are some suggestions about onboarding. Discussing your core values in depth, expectations about the position, and how the organization is there for them as well. This a welcome binder. This might be something that is, you've got a million things to do. You probably don't need a million and one things to do, but job descriptions, safety procedures. I mean, do you have a safety plan for your library? I developed a safety plan for all of our 11 extension offices. I was responsible for that. And it was important part of the orientation to make sure that that people knew if there was a fire, if there was something there's a customer that was irate, what to do, and where to meet. For instance, if you have more than one employee, something happens in the library, where do you meet to make sure that everybody is accounted for and safe? Send out an email announcing the new hire, to just like celebrate the new hire. If this person is going to be trained or partly trained by a member of your team, discuss that with your team members. This should be done before the new employee shows up, of course. Of the expectations of them on helping the new employee. And then you'd be checking in with them several times a day to answer any of their questions. Now, some of this sounds silly, of course, because I've drawn it from other places where companies are bigger. Extension has 180 employees. And you will, of course, be meeting with them several times a day because they're in your library. But if you're a trustee, for instance, hiring a new director, then this becomes more of a challenge, and it becomes something that is like that you really have to plan out and try to. You must have some time to do this. First month, there's always opportunity to introduce them to key stakeholders. You might want to take them to the town office to meet the town treasurer, the town clerk, the town administrator, people on the board. If you are the director and you've hired these somebody who reports to you, invite them to a trustees meeting. Introduce them to other people in the community that are important to your library. Discuss the hire's long-term goals. So we talked about the position description. We talked about like expectations about what they're going to deliver for the library. But we have to continue talking about those goals, short-term and long-term goals. Also recommended, it all depends on your comfort level, whether you're, social introvert or extrovert or whatever, but an event outside work is also helpful. 3 months and longer, I'm going to go right to the bottom of the slide because this is like what I always repeat is regularly scheduled formal meetings. No matter how many times you see somebody during the day or during the week, it's always important to have a regularly scheduled meeting, monthly or perhaps quarterly, where you're reviewing long-term goals, you're reviewing issues that may have cropped up, and and it gives the opportunity the employee too to talk about things that they see, these things that they see coming in the future at them. And I've learned a lot during regularly scheduled formal meetings as a supervisor about things that I had no clue about unless I had that opportunity for people to talk and for me to listen. And of course, listen is also spelled silent. So these regular scheduled formal meetings is about your employee. It's not about you as much. So anyway, if you have any questions about regularly scheduled formal meetings, how to set them up, I have some documents that I could share with you. Ultimately, you want to make sure that that employee is integrating well into your library's culture. And, that's just communication, contact, observation, making sure that they know what's expected of them, having other library employees, if appropriate, and if that's part of the job, help train them, and just helping them out get through the ropes. Provide more information about learning and growth opportunities. I've seen library budgets, and there isn't often a lot of money for professional development, but professional development money is one of the keys to selling that job, and also in valuing and respecting the employee. So if there's any possible way to pay their way to an actual in-person thing, like the LA conference is coming up in April, or pay for a webinar, or just have time for a webinar. Those are important things to show value and respect. Joy, you had a question or a comment.
There's a question in the chat for you have on there, invite the new hire to an event outside of work. And the question is, would that be a one-on-one thing or something you'd invite your whole team to?
I would do it the whole team kind of thing. But it all depends on how you feel. You could take them out to lunch, after a month or two, just to see like everything going okay, just a different venue. But I have it's first Thursday trivia night at McGillicuddy's tonight, and that's one of the work things that I do to try to keep connected to people. So it all depends on your level of comfort, or the level of comfort of the employee. You will start to know them more and more, and it'll be perhaps obvious, like, is this appropriate or not appropriate? So it's all about your judgment. And that's the thing about managing talent and helping people through their careers and helping people on the job, is that it's a lot of it is judgment, and there's errors and there's successes. And so you just have to use your best judgment of what's appropriate.
And Gary, then somebody also asked a follow-up, who would pay for this? Like if you did something outside of work.
Yes, right. Well, generally, it's like Dutch. Is that even, can you even say that? It would be personal expense. It would be even at UVM, like if we went out to lunch, it would not be considered a business expense because, hey, listen, folks, you can meet during regular work time. You don't need to go out to lunch and have the company pay for it for you to meet. And additionally, there's the issue of, like, if you have a lunch meeting, then you have to pay that person for that hour. So this is just a social opportunity. It's personal pay. It's not an appropriate business expense.
So I'm wondering about a couple things about that. How do you deal with like the nuance of you've invited somebody to do something and maybe they don't have the discretionary income to do it. And then they're uncomfortable and then they're like, oh, I better go because my new supervisor asked me to go, even though I really don't
Yeah,
want to pay for that. And then
it's
also, it makes me feel a little bit like it could feel like favoritism or something, like, oh, that person's going out to lunch with the supervisor.
yeah.
So, can you talk about those things a little?
Yeah, those are all really good points. And there's people in my office, well, once when I had an office, that you'd never see, at a social event. They're just uncomfortable. They have a busy life. They might have financial considerations. Um, so all those things are this lumped in again to judgment. And this isn't like these are suggestions. These are some ideas. One of the documents I'm going to be sending you is 49 things that sometimes are overlooked in onboarding. And I read through them and it's just like, yeah, right. That's that. Well, yeah, yeah, maybe if you have 10,000 people in your company. So just take this with your own, grain of salt and your own judgment. And I think once you start learning more about the person, then you could make make the decision. I mean, it could be a lunch. Yeah, I mean, just eating lunch with them on the picnic table outside, sort of thing. So I don't want anybody to get stuck on this because this sometimes maybe even happens later, much later, when you start developing more friendships and stuff. But the trivia night tonight, one of the participants who we give a hard time to is the director of extension. So and we don't talk about work, so that's very nice. um so I think I'm done with this slide. Thank you, by the way, for all your questions. And when you're talking about HR management, it is a judgment thing. It's just like that's why there's so many HR management jobs out there, is because there's a lot to do functionally. Make sure payroll is done, make sure benefits are done, benefits managers, payroll managers, but there's also that soft skill of managing employees. And there's no one perfect way. They're just some best management practices that seem to be successful over time. And then there's maybe some crazy ideas also to help integrate that employee into the unit. I like a welcome potluck. I spent quite a bit of time in Wisconsin, both going to school and working. And boy, those Badger State people, they love their potlucks. Um, Include these things that often go missing. So this is just example, just some ideas. And I talked about celebration first. It's a joyous occasion to have a new employee because there's a lot of excitement. New skills and talents and knowledge are being brought in-house. A new personality. I'm working on a committee right now where I've been the program chair of this committee for 10 years, and we just added a new member, and she's got to replace me now because she's just got so many great ideas and a lot of energy, and it's wonderful to see new employees with that kind of energy. So it's like a celebration. We've got, like, this is fantastic. Clear expectations. Um, excuse me. A lot of companies or organizations, when they meet with you about your position description, there's actually a signature line on the end. So they're making sure that people read it, they've seen it, they've had questions about it, they can ask. But the job description is important, and clear expectations. And there might be things, other duties as assigned, that just happen. They got to be a team player. Not everything in your job is going to be on the job description, and there's things that happen, like pandemics, that change, and you can't change your job description every 6 months, although it should be reviewed probably on an annual or semi-annual basis. involvement from other employees. So if you need help, it's a team effort to get somebody as a member of the team, and then continue check-ins. In this slide, it's a buddy is assigned, and with our new employee at UVM, we assigned somebody as a mentor, and she is calling this new employee often and just touching bases with her. She is not the person's supervisor. There are things that the supervisor needs to do, or the mentor would defer a question to the supervisor. But it's really, I think our new employee, this feels so welcomed that that we have all this support structure for us, and she's indicated that it's just been a wonderful process after a month being on board. And that was all that I had. So I know that we're ending a little bit early, but that's fine because maybe you have some observations that you could share of what has worked well for you, or you have some questions or some comments. But well, if we end early, we end early. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing.
So feel free to turn on your mics, cameras now if you would like as well, especially if you want to say something. And it looks like Margaret, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you. I feel like I always have a question. So you referred to this previously, Gary, about how like a library job description or library personnel policy or HR policy, how that matches up with, if you're a municipal library, with your town's personnel policy or, job description template or whatever. And any guidelines about that? Ours have been quite different, but we're wondering if in the interests of town harmony, it would be better for us to be more in.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Margaret. And town harmony, I mean, that's a sometimes a challenging one, but it's there's a spectrum, and you know of it because of your relationship to the town. In the public library in Georgia, we don't have an HR policy separate from the town. So the town's HR policy is the library's policy. There are no modifications to it. The job descriptions we have developed on our own based on library peers' job descriptions and job descriptions that we have that we redevelop and redo. There's no, I'm not a guiding light on this. I do like consistency. It must be my accounting background. Because a consistency, if you're a municipal library with the municipality, helps the library feel part of the municipality. I think there's less opportunity for misunderstanding about what you may be doing with employees that other departments in the municipality may not be doing. But it's based on history, it's based on preference, it's based on the strength of the trustees, perhaps, and the direction that they give, the enthusiasm, authority, or the power of the director in taking leadership on some of these things. But there's no one way to go. I think, and of course with incorporated libraries, you're a barrel with your own bottom, so you set up the whole governance structure of the corporation. And did that answer, Margaret?
Yes, thank you.
Gary, there are a couple questions in the chat, which I think you can see this one.
I don't see the chat.
Oh, okay, so Pamela's a new director, started in December at a small library in Southeast Vermont. She's asking, would you recommend reviewing job descriptions and expectations with employees as the new director?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's a good opportunity to take a look at job descriptions and to just get some feedback on what may have changed. The challenge, I think, for a new director in a library is that you don't have the experience about what's been going on, or you're just getting your feet on what the vision is, what the direction may be. So to change job descriptions radically that first bit of your tenure, I would have caution about. But I think it would be really important to review the job description with the employee, and that is a solid foundation. At the University of Vermont, I'm sorry, I work for them, so I keep going back to them for annual performance evaluations. For instance, the job description is key. You start with that, and then the goals, SMART goals are built on that. Job performance is built on that. And then, of course, the savvy employee and supervisor will always know there's exceptions to the rule. Like, we wanted to do X this year, but we didn't because of what happened with Y. So job descriptions, it would be a nice way to get to know people too, in a little bit, more in-depth kind of manner too.
So another question is about course correction. So yeah, if it several months in, um, course correction. And it would be great if you addressed it verbally. I'm also, Betty, I'm putting a link in the chat to another workshop that Gary did, or the recording of it and the resources from that is about this that you might find helpful. But also be great to hear you talk about it as well. But Gary, thank you.
Oh, so course correction, could you add just a little bit more to that, if you could?
Well, I can, this is Betty. I can add, I feel that we missed some I'm on the board of trustees. I'm not the library director. I think we missed some opportunities for clarity and for establishing routines and personnel routines going, policies and meeting. I think we just missed some opportunities to be clear. And we do have standing meetings. We also are almost at the place where we'll have a slightly new board in place. And after I wrote that, I thought maybe just reviewing the job description is a good place to start. And that would find where the weaknesses are. Maybe it was a redundant question.
Okay, thank you, Betty. Thanks for the clarification. So I have this other rule that I would tell to anybody who wanted to listen, and there weren't that many of them, but is that the way to change behavior in an organization of an individual is to change job description, so modify job description. So if we had a different project, significantly knew something, then it would be appropriate to look at the job description, work on the job description so that it fits the organizational need. As a trustee, of course, you have the responsibility and authority to manage that library as a successful library. And so the director reports to the board of trustees. And if the board of trustees, as the board, sees a major direction or a course correction is needed, then it is appropriate for them to revisit job description of the director. If it was somebody who reported to the job description to the director, I would work with the director in reviewing the job description of that supervisee or supervisees, and reviewing that. Now, I know as a trustee, there's just so much to do and there's so little time. We really should have kind of a calendar of reviewing job descriptions, every other year. But if there's a major course correction, then it's appropriate to look at the job description and to see how it might not quite fit what you need now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Betty.
Sort of along those lines, Gary, can you talk about Well, I mean, I guess you kind of did address this, but I'm thinking about it like a situation where maybe there were parts of the job description that were in there, but they hadn't really been emphasized. And then, like, basically trustees telling a director, like, I'm expecting you to do these things that we haven't really been expecting you to do before. Or maybe in writing it was there, but um, now you need to up your game and, do these other things that you weren't doing. And it's a little bit like it could feel, I think, maybe like a little bait and switch, just because they're already doing all these other things and maybe doing them very well, but then they're putting something else on which they have the right to do, but it just makes for tension.
Right, and they might have the right to do it. You as a supervisor might have the right to add something to an employee's plate, but as a good manager, you have to be very thoughtful about how you do that. And so, okay, this goes back to the regularly scheduled meetings. So nothing should be a surprise, it's not like, oh, you haven't been doing this, do it now. It's a conversation. So communication is very important. Empathy and understanding about the position as it is very important. And just adding things to people's plates is not a good management style. I was in charge of IT for the organization, and it was a sprawling organization with a lot of moving parts, telecommunications, internet in 11 offices, and I was very, very aware of the IT. We had two employees in when there was a major something coming down the pike, or if there's something that had to be changed, had to be very careful about what their workload was at the moment, what might free up in the future. So it's about communication. It's about those regularly scheduled meetings. It's about understanding what they do and the value of what they do, and it's the communication. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a soft answer, but that's what I think managing and supervising is about. There's going to be mistakes that you'll make, but those simple things of spending time with the employee, communicating well, understanding the position is you got to do that if you're a supervisor and want to be successful.
Yeah, and Betty wrote in the chat that she would see that as a collaborative process, which is
Yes, thank you very much, Gary. I
Yeah.
just need some reassurance about being a better team.
Yeah, and it's all about being a better team, because it's just like it's awful working in an environment where you're out of sync, or where it's just not working. It's just lousy to go to work in the morning. And so communicating well, understanding. Of course, it takes courage too. Sometimes you
I want to also be clear that it's not that there are problems. I don't mean to imply that at all. I didn't just looking for
yeah.
very wide improvement.
Okay, yeah, we won't say, oh, yeah, that Betty, she's got problems at her. But no, I understand. It's things happen, and job descriptions change over time, and different priorities crop up. You've got to manage that to be a successful library.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that back to like the library, the organization being successful, because that's the shared goal, right? So if people aren't getting along and they're not able to be doing their work well because of the situation being uncomfortable, then it's not great for the organization or the
Yeah.
people.
Right, or if they're not, or if you're not working quite on the right things, something changes. And we all learned that through the pandemic, right? I mean, the switches and the pivots that everybody had to do was dizzying. So yeah, thank you, Betty.
So I put a link to the evaluation for this in the chat. It's really helpful if people can do that. That it's nice and short, but it does help us with future planning. And we do still have a few minutes if anyone has any more comments or questions. Great opportunity to ask Gary questions. All right, well, it looks like people are saying thank you in the chat, but maybe no more questions at this point. So I will add thank you as well, Gary. It's been great as always. So thank you everybody for coming and for the work that you're doing. Particularly thank you to trustees that are here. I think it's so important that you are thoughtful about this, and I appreciate that you're taking the time to do training as well as the librarians who do that. So I will
Yeah.
stop the recording now.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.